Hello, and welcome to another episode in the Georgia Workers' Compensation video series. My name is Jason Perkins. I'm an attorney who specializes in handling Georgia workers' compensation cases. I created this series of videos to provide people who've been hurt at work in Georgia with helpful information about Georgia's workers' compensation laws and the benefits they should receive under those laws. Now, let's jump straight into today's topic. Today, I'd like to talk to you about workers' compensation injuries on a construction site. Working on a construction site can be dangerous work. There's many risks involved in it. Some of the common risks include that you're working around heavy machinery, that you're working with heavy objects that you may have to lift or carry, um, and often you're working at different levels and on different floors. And so there's some risk that an object might be dropped from above and strike you, or that you could be working on a floor above ground level and fall and be injured. Another risk is that you're working often on uneven ground or with objects that may be on the ground that could cause you to trip or slip and fall. Because of these risks, it's quite common for people working on a construction site to suffer workers' compensation injuries. If you suffer a workers' compensation injury on a construction site, it's very important for you to be aware of the workers' compensation rules that are going to apply to a Georgia workers' compensation claim. One thing that commonly comes up when individuals suffer an injury on a construction site is that there's a question about what workers' compensation insurance is going to cover it, or is there workers' compensation insurance that's going to cover that injury? Unfortunately, many companies that work on construction sites don't always provide workers' compensation insurance. Even if they're supposed to get it under Georgia's workers' compensation law, they may not satisfy their duty to do that. And so you may suffer an injury and may find that your immediate employer does not have workers' compensation insurance coverage to cover that injury. Fortunately, there's a part of Georgia's workers' compensation law that has been created to try to help with this situation. It's what's referred to as statutory employer coverage. And what it can do is sometimes provide workers' compensation coverage for injuries on a construction site, even when your immediate employer doesn't have that workers' compensation insurance coverage. So if you find out that your immediate employer saying they didn't have workers' compensation insurance coverage for your injury, don't just stop there. Statutory employer coverage is something that's important to look into. Now, if there is coverage for your workers' compensation injury, what benefits can you receive? Under Georgia's workers' compensation law, there are three basic types of workers' compensation benefits. The first is wage loss benefits. Those are called temporary total disability and temporary partial disability. Temporary total disability pays you if you're completely out of work as a result of your workers' compensation injury. Temporary partial disability pays you if you're working but earning less money as a result of your injury. So maybe you're back on light duty and not making as much as you used to make. Or maybe you're working less hours because you're having to attend doctor's appointments or something like that. A second type of benefit is your medical benefits. This is the workers' compensation insurance company paying for the medical treatment and testing you need because of your work injury with certain authorized doctors. A third benefit is something called permanent partial disability or permanent impairment benefits that pays you an amount of money if a doctor determines you have a permanent impairment as a result of your workers' compensation injury. Now, another very important thing to know if you suffer a workers' compensation injury in Georgia is what doctors can provide you with treatment. Georgia's workers' compensation law does contain special rules that determine which doctors you can see after your workers' compensation injury. In most workers' compensation claims, you have some choice of doctors, but that choice is limited. Your employer is supposed to post what's called a panel of physicians, which is basically a list of doctors that employees can see if they suffer a workers' compensation injury. There are certain rules that determine how many doctors have to be on that panel of physicians, and what type of doctors have to be on that panel of physicians. But if your employer follows those rules, then there's a good chance you're at least initially going to have to see a doctor on that panel of physicians. If your employer did not follow the rules or did not post a panel of physicians, there's a good chance you can probably pick whatever doctor you want to treat your workers' compensation injury, which that can be very helpful because you're not just limited to maybe 6 doctors on their list, many of whom may be a different type of specialty than the doctor that you need to see. Now, another question you may have is, what happens if you can't return to work after a workers' compensation injury? Well, as I mentioned earlier, Georgia's workers' compensation law does provide wage loss benefits after a workers' compensation injury. It's not your full lost wages, it's a percentage of them, generally 2/3 of them, although there is a maximum cap to the amount that you can receive. But how long do those benefits get paid for? Well, there are time limits on them, but that time limit is generally in terms of years rather than weeks or months. So it's not anything that you immediately have to worry about. But many people do want to return to the type of work that they did before they got hurt. And if they suffer a serious injury, they may not even be able to return to work even after they get treatment from the doctor and get better. As I mentioned earlier, some serious injuries unfortunately result in permanent impairments. So it may be the case that the limitations you have after a serious injury prevent you from returning to the type of work that you did before. Now, one of the things that you're going to face in this situation is that the workers' compensation insurance company is going to want to pay as little as possible on your workers' compensation case. So they're going to be trying to do things to get your benefits stopped, like getting the doctor to say that you can go back to work, maybe even though you're not able to go back to work, or offering you light-duty jobs that may not be convenient to you. So one of the difficulties about not being able to return to work is that there's probably going to be some hassles that the workers' compensation insurance company is going to try to put you through. Fortunately, Georgia's workers' compensation law does have some special rules that apply to insurance companies offering you light-duty jobs or what they have to do to stop your workers' compensation benefits. But if you don't have someone on your side who understands all these special rules, you may experience a lot of difficulty and may find that your benefits end up getting cut off. Because of this, I always recommend that someone who suffered a serious workers' compensation injury and is experiencing long-term limitations because of that injury reach out to a workers' compensation attorney to find out more details about how those special rules apply to their specific injury and what risks there are going to be in their workers' compensation case in the future. I hope you found the information in this video helpful. If you have, please consider 2 things before you go. First, I'd really appreciate if you give this video a like or a thumbs up, and consider subscribing to this channel if you'd like to be notified of future videos in the Georgia Workers' Compensation video series. Second, if you've got workers' compensation questions, please reach out to get answers. I offer free consultations in Georgia workers' compensation cases. If you'd like to set one of those up, there's 2 easy ways you can do so. The first is by calling the phone number at the bottom of the screen, and the other is by reaching out to us to our website, which is www.perkinslawtalk.com. Just click on and submit the free consultation request form there, and a member of our team will reach out to you and get a consultation scheduled. I'd like to thank you again for watching this video today. I'd like to wish you the best of luck as you recover from your injuries.